that's what went around, so.
Right.
So it should be pretty solid.
Yeah. So that's that one.
Okay.
6.2 is the island survey, so I don't have a whole lot on that one either, other than, so we did this island survey in the fall. So the results are on the agenda then for that December meeting. So we got like 500 and something responses, which is less than we did the 2018 island survey, which got like 600 and something responses, but
Yeah.
pretty good.
Still not bad.
And generally, the most thing of interest, if you look on the agenda, is that almost everything like stayed pretty similar. So if you look at like people's perceptions on stuff, except for housing questions had shifted. So like kind of across the board, everybody's response for housing was like housing was a little less urgent and a little less dire. And so we can sort of look at it in terms of there was less people who replied than in the previous round. So we're like, we're not sure if it's, you know, different demographic replied to the survey, or people have left Bowen already, or, you know, and so the people who haven't left Bowen are more securely housed, and so they don't view it as urgent. Or if it is just like shifting perceptions a little less urgent now because it is, so.
Well, we definitely lost rental units on those, so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good bet that a lot of people left.
Yeah. And so now when, like there's now more people, so in the 2018 survey, I think it was like, there's one thing that was talking about, you know, housing needs on Bowen. And I think 3% of the people said there's enough housing on Bowen, we don't need more. And in the 2019, it was up to 10%. So it's like more of a percentage of people are sort of have that view of housing on Bowen than showed up in the earlier one, which is, I found interesting because when I came to Bowen, that was something I'd see consistently throughout like council reports of rezonings, was the strong feedback of like, we don't need more people, we don't need more housing on Bowen. And I've never had it in any rezoning that I've done in the 4.5 years I've been here, but it's still there. So that was that's 6.2.
I'm just realizing I didn't link any of these.
I know.
What a night, so I'm copying them to put them on the screen. Sorry.
So the next one, 6.3, is 720 Gardner Lane. So that's the rezoning for the retreat center zone. So I prepared bylaws and brought them to council based on the ABC feedback and based on the parks and trails. So it had a park dedication as part of it, but council took it and said that the park dedication area is not sufficient, and they directed me to work with the applicant to increase the size of the park. That's in the
What
rezoning.
percentages were involved
So in the draft, I think the park was 1.1 hectares
out of?
8 hectares. And council, yeah, directed it back to staff to work with the applicant to revise the park dedication.
I'm sorry, how many hectares in an acre, or thrown the other way
2.5
around?
acres.
Yeah.
2.5 acres.
2.5 acres per hectare.
Yeah.
So it's a big parcel, okay.
Yeah, it's a 20
More than
acre.
10
It's
acres anyway.
It's a 20 acre parcel.
Yeah.
Yeah. And basically the proposal is that so 10 acres of it be the retreat center and 10 acres remaining.
Oh, okay,
so
sorry, I remember this one now. This is the retreat, the yoga retreat, with
Yeah.
the accommodation and kitchen issues. And,
Yeah.
gee, I thought they had offered way more park
So,
area. but-
yeah, so essentially it's like retreat center would be 10 acres. And then in the current zoning, then it would allow like 2 5-acre lots.
Mhm.
And so we proposed a 2.5 acre park, and the remainder being 2 lots, and council wanted to see much larger park dedication and much smaller than lots that remain.
And of course, they're not actually gonna develop most of the forest anyway.
No.
But not that that's any reassurance.
Yeah. So that was our council direction, which is,
So it sounds like council read our conservation development materials. Oh, there it is, okay.
this one, yeah.
Just love the kind of type, like zoning.
Zoning.
What's some zoning?
Yeah,
Zoning,
that's what the cool planner is called.
Yeah.
That's the cool thing.
famous Hungarian magician.
I kept typoing thanks, it'll be like tanks.
That's what I've been doing lately.
Isn't it so British? Do you want to look at any of this, Michael? This is that.
Yeah, no, actually, it's all coming back.
It's all coming back, okay.
And then the last one were the active design guidelines. So those came to the APC in October or November.
Yeah.
And so this was coming back to council to be adopted. So council adopted it. they had a number of, so this, I can just see that the motion they passed had a number of just like wording changes to it. So Emma had revised it all based on the EPC and based on the various committees' comments. And so the council had a few more language comments, but then did adopt it at that meeting.
Okay. Great.
So, we could probably dig into the island survey a bit if we've got.
Now, I don't know that, or like,
Or-
do you want to start one of the items to start talking about, and then we can actually visit it? Like, or go through them then?
Really, we need to have a forum to vote on the minutes. So
Okay.
unless anybody had any comments on the minutes. I thought they were good.
Yeah, comments.
Cardena's a repeat,
Yeah,
so why don't we,
start with Cardena. Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense, because there's
See
lots.
how many
Bit of background.
pages you have to say that you just do 6 to a page on the.
right,
Yeah.
I mean, and it's still very readable.
right, I felt like I didn't print the, did I print the?
You didn't
I
really
printed
include
that.
the presentation.
What's that? I did print the presentation? So I didn't include it at all?
No, but I clicked on the tab and
Oh,
got
I
it.
just couldn't look at that.
Yeah.
How did you get, okay. Oh, okay, yeah. So, now we're gonna go to 375 Cardena.
275 Cardena. Okay, and so what was council's response on this?
Yeah, so this one, I then came back with a bylaw for council, so council gave the bylaw, gave it first reading and referred it back to UPC and to, they referred it to the housing committee again and to the Islands Trust for comment.
But we don't have the actual bylaw.
So it should be in the staff report, but I'll go through it in my presentation and just
Oh,
go through
okay.
the gist of what's in the bylaw.
Okay.
Steph, if you want to make the thing full.
Oh, it's a clickable thing, right?
Here, so 375 Cardena is the Bowen Island Marina. So it's right here off the ferry. And so, remember, it's about these ones and the area in between. And so it's this weird double zoned property that's zoned Village Commercial 2B, the commercial part, and then it's zoned SR2, the house part. So what they're proposing is essentially to legitimize what's already there, but so it's to allow an additional secondary suite in a single family home, to permit the existing buildings that were constructed after the adoption of the development permit, and to amend their land-based marina facilities definition to permit eating establishments to have designated seating within them. So this is when I came to council, I brought what the other committees had said. So the Housing Advisory Committee just commented on the secondary suite part of it, so that SR2 part, and they said that this met with their goals of it, and it creates, so you can read a good example of multiple suites, a flexible response, it creates the type of housing units Bowen Island needs. The Community Economic Development Committee recommended support, and they just commented on the commercial part of it, and they were saying really what they wanted to see come out of it is thinking about that area for a public washroom on that site. And then, as a reminder, so when it came to this committee, the APC last time, APC supported the allowance of the secondary suite within their house, and the APC supported additional development in the area and removing the restriction on takeout food and seating. So I brought to council this draft bylaw number 497, and it had 4 clauses within it. So it added this settlement residential 2 with a zone variation F on it.
Hi, David.
No.
Apologize.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
So this bylaw said it would allow up to 2 accessory residential uses. So an accessory residential use is a secondary suite, so it would allow up to 2. And then placed this portion of the secondary suite within this SR2F portion. It amended the village commercial. And so what it did is before the VC2B had quite a high floor space ratio and lot coverage, and then it said but despite that, you're only allowed what's in these development permits, and that's it. So instead, what we put in is a floor space area of 168 square meters and maximum lot coverage, and then has a maximum height that's the same as what is given, but it says that it's from the finished grade of the pier, so it's saying it's not from grade, which is how we normally measure height, which would be the sort of the ocean floor or this level of the sea, but it says from the level of the pier. Yeah.
Okay, and sorry, where did these things come from? You just, when you started drafting the bylaw, is it appropriate to do it that way? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and so this was based on the APC and the Economic Development Committee saying, okay, well, let's allow a little bit more than what's there now. We can see additional development take place within the zone. So this would allow some additional floor area within the zone. And then have a new definition for this land-based marina facility. So the highlighted words, the additional words. So it would say, with incidental seating areas for consumption on the premise. I'll note that I have a note to go over this. When I went to the Economic Development Committee, this was referred to them as well after first reading, and they wanted me to think about, okay, what's incidental mean? How exactly is that?
How about accessory?
Yeah. And so council then gave that first reading. They referred it to the Housing Advisory Committee, the APC, the Community Economic Development Committee, and the Islands Trust, and then they put conditions on it so that the applicant hold a public open house. And to complete a code compliance report on the existing non-compliant retail building prior to consideration of second reading. So that's been the building inspector's concern, is about that infill building in the middle, is like what do they need to make it code compliant? Knowing that if we approve the zoning, they would have to go get a building permit and they'd have to do the report. We're saying, okay, do it now so that it's sort of clear before we go second reading and public hearing what you're gonna have to do. And if it's gonna entail major work that you don't wanna do, well, know it now before we go to public hearing.
Yeah, makes sense.
And so that was the presentation that I had, and so this is just the recommendation that's in your agenda to whether you support or not support the bylaw.
Yeah. Daniel, we started, David.
That's okay, I've read it all.
Oh, okay. Okay, good. We started by doing the review information of what council's done and that sort of thing. So we haven't actually taken any action on anything yet. So I will call this meeting to order. And the first is the approval of the agenda. Anybody have any changes or modifications to the agenda? Okay, adoption of minutes.
Okay, I'll move approval of the agenda.
Okay. Okay, David, second. Yep, unanimous. Okay. Now we move to the adoption of minutes. Do we have a motion on that?
It's Louise's turn.
Okay.
And I'll second.
And David, or Michael seconds. Okay. No public, no members of the public here, so no public comments. Next item is the election of the chair of this august body. And first one would be, the chair. Do we hear any nominations for chair?
Oh, do you want the job or should I? Because I'll nominate Drew if you, okay, well, I would nominate Drew Rose to continue as chair.
Because I was gonna-
Unless someone else wants it, David, it'll be, probably
Okay. Okay. Drew is, would you be interested in the job?
I think I'm a little young in the committee.
Oh, Drew's gonna like that.
Okay.
I'm new, too new.
Okay, do I hear a motion to?
Yeah, I move the nominations close.
Okay. Second, okay. And all in favor of Drew? Great. Now, vice chair. Are any nominations for vice chair?
Oh, I think this Dennis Wilson guy's pretty good at it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Unless you would be willing to do that? No? Okay. Okay.
So I'll move nominations for vice chair close.
Okay. Okay. All in favor? Okay.
Well, that was an ugly battle for an hour, wasn't it?
I want these jobs so badly. Okay. All in favor of Dennis Wilson? Okay.
He's on that.
Wow, great. Okay. Now, council referrals.
What
Oh, we're
is
gonna
this
do that
recommendation
schedule.
about?
Oh,
the-
schedule stuff, okay, right,
So I
okay.
realized the 5 o'clock is in there, okay, I realized.
So, yeah, well, and that's what we.
That's why it came out, right, I forgot I
Okay,
put that in there.
we sort of talked about whether it was important to have it at 7 or 5, and it appeared as by talking to most of the members that 5 would be okay, workable. Now, Mr. Picallo, I haven't heard from him. Who's missing, and who else is missing?
And Drew, yeah.
And
Drew,
Is Drew okay
Kirsty,
with it?
Kirsty, yes.
Kirsty, and
I wonder if we shouldn't defer this
Yeah,
one
let's
until we have
defer.
everybody here, or at least you've heard from everybody.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
What
okay.
do you, David, do you have a preference, 5 or 7?
Doesn't matter to me.
Okay.
so we'll tentatively say next month at 5, but I'll talk to people in the meantime.
Okay,
That makes sense.
okay, sounds good. So, okay, now council deferrals. Daniel, 1050 Miller Road,
Do we want to do Cardena first? Does that work?
Cardine,
Okay.
okay.
Let's do the presentation that we have it up on the screen.
Oh,
That's
okay.
this one. So that was 5.2.
Okay, 5.2.
It's just the top of the next page.
Yeah. Okay, council, for David's edification, council has, Daniel's drafted a bylaw which went to council, which referred to us to review. And, anyone have comments on that?
I just have a question about
Mhm.
process.
Sure.
So so this is an amendment to a current bylaw.
Yeah.
And the bylaw, how is this amendment different?
Sure. So the bylaw, it amends bylaw 57, which is our land use bylaw. So that's the bylaw that like has the zoning for all of Bowen. So it'll have like all the definitions, and it's all the zones, and it's all the regulations. And then what we do is when somebody like applies to rezone, we draft a bylaw, and what the bylaw says is that it's a bylaw to amend the land use bylaw. So essentially any rezoning is we do an amendment bylaw to the land use bylaw, and then our clerks consolidate it. So we'll have a consolidated copy of the land use bylaw, which is bylaw 57 with all subsequent amendments to it. And it has this table at the front that's like, these are all the amendments that took place to bylaw 57. And that becomes our zoning bylaw. So what I did here is this bylaw 497, and so what it has in it, the gist of these four clauses in it to do 4 different things, right? So it adds this new zone essentially to our zoning bylaw. It places the house in the zone to say, okay, this is what's in effect here, and then it changes, it amends the VC2B zone to say, this is what the zone will do, and then amends the definition.
And then can it be applied to another process at
So-
some point
yeah,
down the road?
So like by creating this zone variation, we'll have made this settlement to F section of the land use bylaw, and they'll just be, this will be the only property that's in it, but in theory then somebody else could apply and say, you know,
Based on
I want to
this.
join the SR2F zone variations with SR2 because I want 2 secondary suites in my house as well.
Okay.
So from that, it sort of makes it simpler, I guess, for somebody else to do it. Maybe creates a precedent. It doesn't really, because it's like if we didn't have this and somebody applied to do it, I would just be making a zone that says this.
So we did have one comment with regard to long-term rental. That's not an appropriate thing to put in the bylaw?
Yeah, I
Zoning
guess it's like-
normally doesn't cover
Yeah.
owner versus rental, does it?
Yeah, I mean, it can now,
Okay.
in that you're now allowed to zone for tenure. So you can zone and say has to be rental or residential.
Okay.
What it does do, like, in this is like, you can't sell them, they can't subdivide it, they can't stratify it. So in essence, they would have a house with 3 units in it. They would be allowed in the zoning, but they can't sell them individually.
Yeah, I see the practical issue there, that they can do nothing other than rent it or live in
Yeah.
it themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
Or it's like in theory, then they could convert it all back into one house and just live in it.
yeah,
But
so
they could do that.
I guess it's technically it's an issue, but I don't see it makes much difference to this particular site.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like right now, none of them would be allowed to be, like a short-term rental, like they couldn't Airbnb them.
No, because of
Because
the
their
overriding
kitchens are- yeah.
regulatory thing. Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
sure.
Something maybe for us to consider is that, like, we've been working on a short-term rental policy and amendment bylaws. And so then it would be maybe when that's done, this zone should say, and you're not allowed to be a short-term rental use
Okay.
in this SR2F. So it's like you get 2 secondary suites, but that means you don't get to do short-term rental. I mean, right now we just don't allow it anywhere, so it's not a thing that, you know,
Okay,
something to
that's,
flag.
yeah, I'm fine with that.
The short-term rental, so, should we address short-term rental even though we haven't, but we may?
Yeah.
I mean, because if we try to go back and apply that to this, that's a problem, because
Yeah, so maybe, I mean, I think more of just ABC comments, your comments would just be your comments that the SR2F zone is not appropriate for short-term rental.
okay.
Okay, that's a good way to resolve
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Okay.
Although when you think about it, having a short-term rental immediately adjacent to the ferry, you know, a marina, you come in on your boat,
Yeah.
you have a overnight place to go over. I'm not so sure I'd be opposed to it, but that's not our issue, is it?
Well, you know, maybe this is probably the exception to the rule then.
You know what, I think maybe we just stay silent on that, Dennis. Because as they told us that they're planning to have a long-term tenant, right? When they applied. And that's fine, but that's not a commitment and maybe I like it that way. I can see it, maybe it does make sense if you're gonna have short-term, I don't know what where council's headed on the overall short-term rental policy, but it does make sense to have short-term rental convenient to a facility like a marina. As I say, somebody comes in on their boat, they need a nice bed that doesn't rock and a shower that actually has hot water overnight, and it all fits together. Plus the marina gets the moorage fees. So,
David?
I agree, except if I were a neighbor, I might be upset.
Yeah.
I've been down the Marina when people come in and have parties, and if you had a bed right there at Norma's place, and you invite a few friends up, could happen on a regular basis. I think as a neighbor, I would be upset with the municipality passing something that would allow what could be a party house.
Okay, but that, to my mind, is an issue for the short-term rental policy, the island-wide short-term rental policy, is the impact on neighbors.
Well, that's true, but here we are making an exception in an area that doesn't allow this.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm not, sorry, maybe I'm not clear. We're recommending that we specifically allow short-term rentals in this particular site. I'm just saying I'm prepared to leave that decision to the island-wide policy, rather than bar them right now.
So like if we allow short-term rentals, which is sort of the proposal is it would be allowed in a secondary suite, we have a good neighbor agreement, you have to follow it, and if you violate it, you lose your license.
Was
You
it,
need, you know, there's something that could cover the whole island for secondary suites, you're comfortable that these secondary suites would be covered by that same policy.
Well, is it, the next step is a public comment on this particular rezoning?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think David's concern is legitimate enough. We should make sure that that's part of the public commentary.
Like capturing potential.
Yeah, I keep going back and forwards and sideways on this, but maybe our comment is that the possibility that the accessory residential use is a short-term rental be subject of the public commentary. See what happens. Does that do it for you, Dave?
That's fine, I'm just expressing a concern that we would be granting to this particular place because of its location, something that the neighbors might object to.
Well, and I'm not in favor of that, but I'm also not in favor of prohibiting anything for this particular place that's otherwise allowed island-wide.
It's fine.
Yeah, okay. Can you make sense of that, somebody?
I just said that, with the following comments, that the SR2F zone possibly permits short-term rental uses subject to public comment results.
Okay, fine with me.
You can tweak that.
That sounds good.
Findings
Or,
of public comment, subject to the findings of open
That's
house,
not really
No, it's like,
public consultation process,
yeah,
Yeah.
subject to the results,
I would just say for process, like public consultation.
public consultation process.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
But isn't it also a result of the short-term rentals?
Oh, well, that's so far along now, isn't it? It's been adopted for.
So maybe it's like that this, so what does it say right now?
That the SR2 zone possibly permit short-term rental uses.
I would say like not exclude or something like that.
yeah, that's better.
Okay.
So then you say not, don't specifically exclude it from this site, but unless all the neighbors say we really don't want to see it, like the only way we're okay with this zoning going ahead is if it doesn't allow the short.
Subject to
the
the
short-
consultation process. Now and there somewhere, results, fine.
Yeah.
I can figure it
But not preclude, not
Oh.
preclude short-term rental.
out. We have excluded.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
The applicant to host a public open house
Yeah.
and complete it, yeah, so it's,
So that, yeah,
That's
that's what
already
it's
being
established.
directed,
Okay.
okay.
When
What-
you say
what
good
is-
neighbor agreement, is that just that area?
That's like, that's the short-term rental policies that we would make that part of, like a business license requirement for short-term rentals, and how it could be agreement.
All over the island?
Yeah.
and I haven't followed the short-term rental discussion, except to know that it is a major discussion. What is the status of that? Has council actually made any decisions?
So
or-
council gave us direction to like draft bylaws,
Oh, I see.
that would allow it, it would allow it like, for up to 120 days in a dwelling to be a short-term rental.
Okay, is there any other regulation of it, or?
Yeah, and then it would be subject to business license regulation that would include the good neighbor agreement and having a local contact person. And then some language around enforcement and essentially like a 3-strike thing in terms of like if you keep getting noise complaints, we're gonna pull your license.
Have we ever done that?
Well, we haven't had business licenses.
No, but has anybody ever been closed down for violations of noise?
Yeah, or at least I can remember, since I've been here, we've sent letters to people, because generally we would get complaints about short-term rental when it's a noise issue. So there's a few that we've sent like threatening letters to, and then they convert to rental units. Or at least they say they will convert them to rental units. More accurate.
Someday.
Yeah.
Are we recommending that we support the bylaw?
Assuming you're supporting it.
Yeah, I would make a motion that we support the bylaw.
Any more comments?
And with the wording that you had about not precluding short-term rentals, except for the subject.
But right now though, the draft doesn't exclude or include short-term rentals, right? It's not there at all.
Yeah.
Right.
And I personally am comfortable just letting the island-wide policy,
Good.
letting the short-term rental bylaw cover the situation. So that means we don't need to make I don't feel the need to make the comment.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
So that's, I will move that the advisory planning commission support bylaw number 497, et cetera, et cetera.
So David, you got that? You're okay with taking that comment out?
That's fine.
Although I know, at 11 o'clock at night, some short-term guy's just having a wild party. I mean, who's gonna show up to shut it down?
So that's part of the need for a local contact. Is essentially say that people need to provide a local contact who they will go up to shut them down. And the good neighbor agreement is part of that, would be providing like the local contact to the neighbors.
Okay.
So
Just as huge practical, I mean, I
Yeah.
lived in rental accommodation where the neighbors had a wild party and this, I mean, the police aren't interested, the bylaw
Yeah.
enforcement people are not at work.
yeah,
All you can do is knock on the door and hope that they're not armed.
yeah. Yeah, so that's part of that's something some other communities do, and I've got like some pushback, I think, when it was first suggested, in terms of people who rent places out and they're not on the island. And so that would be part of the deal, is that you know, at the very least, you find somebody who's available who would exactly shut down a party.
Okay, that's good. Okay.
That's the expectation.
Sorry, Dennis, that wasn't on the agenda, but I was curious.
Yeah, no, that's good.
So
Okay.
we're supporting with no comments? Need to move?
I think that's my motion.
Yeah. Okay, second.
I'll second it.
Second by Louise. All in favor? Aye, unanimous. Okay. We've done Cardena Road, we've been jumping around a bit, Cardena. Now, I guess, and we've done the council staff updates. So I guess we'll go back to 1050 Miller Road.
Okay. So this one is a rezoning application that we received at 1050 Miller Road, which is located on Miller, so it's sort of halfway between the ambulance station and the new Stunco House subdivision and this strip of houses down this stretch. And so by way of background, this is a strip of houses that are zoned SR2, which is like our standard single-family zone. But in the OCP, they're designated as village residential. So our OCP has some policies about the village residential OCP designation, so what's viewed as the long-term future of things in the village residential designation. So it says we'll consider applications for townhouses in the village residential designation, provided the following criteria are satisfied. And there's 3 points. So it's about the scale and character of the development that can blend in with the surrounding natural environment. It's about adequately serviced through Cove Bay water and Sun Cove sewer. And it's about the impacts on adjacent properties, about traffic, privacy screening, and views can be adequately managed. So that kind of gives a roadmap of what we're going to look at. And then it gives a policy that actually has density numbers or unit numbers within it. So it says we'll look at up to 12.5 units per 1 acre, considered appropriate for townhouse development, or up to 17.5 if density is transferred from somewhere else on the island, which is sort of a policy approach in our OCP. Or the proposal involves other than traditional market-based housing, such as, gives examples, non-market housing, rental housing, special needs, etc. So the rezoning.
Can I just add?
Yeah.
When I read the materials, that mystified me. Density is transferred to a site in Snug Cove from elsewhere on the island. How does that work?
So our OCP has several policies, has a map and all this stuff. They do the density. People would transfer density from places that are identified as donors to places that are from sites outside Sun Cove to within. It's never been used in our OCP.
But wouldn't you have to own both parcels to do that?
I think to be feasible, you'd have to own both, or you'd have to have some sort of agreement in place so that it would work.
So what you could do if you wanted density in Snug Cove, which I expect most developers will want because it's a desirable place for people to live, you go buy a piece of property near me on the west side.
Yeah.
Don't develop it at all. Oh, okay, well, if you want to do
So, I mean, some of what I think it doesn't necessarily work, because if you have if you have a 5 acre parcel, then in theory you could subdivide into 2 2.5 acre parcels. In theory you have 1 unit, you could transfer to the cove. A 2.5 acre lot on the west side of Bowen is probably worth more than the land value of the ability to build 1 apartment unit instead of cove.
Okay.
Like you need the land value between the two. I don't think it.
Okay, well, let's hope so, since I own over there. Yeah, okay.
So there's some policies in our OCP that talk about it, but it's never been used.
I was thinking about that and looking at the densities, which seem to get up pretty high. But,
So,
and I was thinking that maybe we start out with, we have a step density based on base density, which is the 40.8 by right, which is OCP, and then allow, say, 60 units an acre is 15 units of that 60 are apartments, and 80 units an acre if it has 10 units of affordable units per acre. So basically an incentive to increase density by providing public amenity. I don't know if those are the exact right numbers, but they sort of broke down pretty easily. Because looking at some of your examples here, some of this housing would look quite good there. It's not really interfering in any way because it's a bluff basically behind Seniors Lane. The issue is going to be parking, and these are fairly deep lots. So I suppose a quick study could be done to take a look at how you can accommodate parking. Though that parking ratio would be fairly low because most of these people would not need cars and may not have them, but a lot of people who don't need them still have cars. Is an ongoing problem. It would be great if one developer would sort of pick up that strip.
Well, I was wondering if it's, I look at, say, this figure 3 on page 16, that the big, I mean, somebody's got to do a land assembly to make that happen, right?
Yes.
And,
But you could assemble really probably 2 of these lots, maybe 3, and build a fair-sized building.
Because one thought that occurred to me is if they do a land assembly, then neighbor concerns are not quite so serious, because you're not having that mix of multifamily and single family. So one thing I did like about the proposal was to not just rezone the 1 lot, but the whole, the 10. I thought that made a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. My biggest concern is traffic flow. And I don't know if there's a provision for bypassing the intersection to allow vehicles, emergency vehicles, et cetera, to go south on the island. But from my experience in North Vancouver, the significant development areas are in areas that can't really afford additional traffic. And I see this as becoming quite a choke point, that intersection. When we look at the like the fire hall, the community center, this
The
increased
health center,
density,
yeah.
like that strip right there, that whole block is gonna be densified to such an extent that it's gonna create a significant traffic issue. And I think part of the issue in North Vancouver, which includes, I think, the Moodyville development, is that traffic consideration wasn't, and maybe it was considered, but choke points weren't necessarily managed or planned appropriately. And already the traffic is an issue on the North Shore. So I just look at, if I've only been here 3 years, and density considerations in some of these areas is increased significantly in just the short period I've been here. And I think moving forward, how long is it going to be before that really becomes an issue, that intersection? So I'm wondering if there's any possibility for installing or adding turn lanes, or even using Seniors Road or Seniors Lane as a bypass. And
That
the
occurred to me
parking.
too,
The parking for this development is on Seniors Lane anyway. Is it possible to ask them, if it's gonna be developed, that entire section, to ask for some part to become roadway?
Do you know how big the road allowance is there?
It's not 60 feet, you know, on the lane.
It's very tight.
It is.
I want to say it's 9 meters, it might be 6 meters at this. So this is off street view, it's just this bit. I know we widened it where area 1 is. And I feel like we widened it maybe from 9 to 12 or from 6 to 12. And so I don't know if this part is just 6 meters, so it's like, it's probably literally from here to somewhere in the ditch.
Okay.
Well, yeah, and I think that there's a way to expand the road, both by dedication from the adjacent properties as they develop, obviously, and expand over here by putting the drainage in a pipe. And there's some places which you'll have to shave off some rock to get some width. But that may be worthwhile given the investment that would be made in there. I would think we don't want parking coming in from the front off of Miller Road, because that would be
Oh, yeah, I mean.
but this does go and connect out to Miller. And actually it could, all this traffic would actually miss that intersection.
Yeah.
So-
I mean,
And I think what the town needs to do is create a roundabout at that intersection. And that would work well for ferry traffic and for regular,
At the Four Corners intersection?
at the
Okay.
Miller Trunk Road
Yeah.
intersection.
Okay, so our comment is then concerned about, we'll call it increased traffic
Yeah,
and on-site parking,
yeah.
sufficient on-site parking. And I notice it's referred to the Transportation Committee, but please don't put this in the minutes, Steph, I'm gonna say something snarky. They're just gonna say, well, we'll make people take buses. But from a planning point of view, you can't count on that, so.
Yeah, and that's more to, if you have a developer developing a larger parcel, they can then accommodate more parking in there.
Yeah, they have to start doing underground parking and stuff like that, yeah, not just surface stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in terms of the traffic, is there a possibility, how much property does the municipality own on each side of Miller Road, on the south and the north side? I mean, if it's the fire hall and the community center, is there a way to widen Miller Road to allow for turning lanes or?
So we've widened Miller past where the fire hall is, like that part, the fire hall through the like commuter parking lot we will be through we're subdividing, that's lot 3, and we're widening Miller. But at this part, after it passes that, it's going by Crippen Park, the property line is kind of roughly where it's almost like the path sort of skirts that property line on this side. On this side, and this gets got really dark.
There is
but-
no path, yeah.
Yeah, there's no path, there's a ditch, and the ditch is on the public part, and then probably where the trees and the fence are, that's where the property line is. When it goes to the intersection, let's see if I can see it. Like at the intersection, where so where what used to be the gas station, there's the row of cherry trees, that's all on municipal property, as is actually like essentially the first row of, you imagine like if you turned in past the cherry trees and you came in park, you're still on municipal property. Like our property actually goes a fair bit wider at this corner. On this side, I think we're pretty close, like it hugs it, but there's room on this side of the intersection that's still municipal property.
Yeah, from that previous photo, I bet BC Hydro will have something to say about it too.
This one? Like,
Well,
It looks like
Yeah,
their hydro lines
hydro
on our
line
right
right
away,
there.
on the
Oh,
municipal
yeah.
right away.
yeah.
And they're so understanding of that issue, I've
Yeah.
heard.
And my point is, I think that needs to be considered, some kind of bypass or turn lane, or especially if the fire hall is gonna be where it is, because if it's already, when the traffic is offloading, or when the ferry's offloading, there's already potential for,
Like it's backed up here.
yeah,
Like
Oh,
for
huge
more
backups,
access,
yeah.
for emergency vehicles not to be able to get through that intersection easily, obviously. But if you have traffic, turning onto Miller Road, traffic coming off, waiting to get off of Miller Road, it's gonna, become an issue, I suspect, in the future. So whether it's the possibility for using Senior Road or widening Miller Road.
Will BC Hydro relocate, I know they have an easement along the side with the poles. Can they be coerced into moving the poles right to the property line?
There is a pole at Cardena Road, the truck road, where they did the new sidewalk down to the
Yeah.
ferry, that they refused to move.
Oh, really?
And I don't know if you know the story there, or is it confidential? There's a pole there that's right in the middle of everything.
Yeah. They
And-
refused to move it. Eventually, we got them to come and lower it. Because initially it was like the ground was much higher, and so initially when we did it, right, it was like sitting there and it was this like dirt mound. So we just
Okay.
began to lower it so we could remove that. But
So,
yes.
so if a car hits a pole that's 6 feet high, that's less damage than it hits one that's 12 feet high.
Yeah, I think this wasn't deep enough. But, so it's like, if we came and said, can you move all your poles? I think it's like they don't like moving one, because then they're they're not lined up straight, they make them like, but in general, I think, like, if we came and said, move all the poles down Miller, they'd say, okay, we'll come and do that, and that'll be however much per pole.
Okay. Well, then we might as well pay for putting it underground, but,
They also they don't like putting it underground if it's then gonna go back above
yeah, I
ground.
know, I'm just being
They're-
sarcastic.
Yeah, but, yeah, they're not always the.
But even that, you know, is sort of, again, as Louise says, we're putting more people in the same area.
Yeah.
So there's more electricity required, more truck, yeah. And I never did get a clear sense of what the actual density was gonna be, or is it, it's gonna be optional, various different lots?
Yeah, so I mean, this was just me putting the thing together in terms of, okay, this is 1050 million that applied, and looking at,
Oh, I see,
at this
okay.
OCP market at 12.5 units an acre, it's like each lot is essentially, you know, a duplex or a triplex, right? At the OCP where it says that, I just call it mixed, so 17.5, it's like, there's like a fourplex on each property roughly, and it's like 40 overall or 30 overall. At the rezoning proposal, it's more like 33 units an acre.
So how
which
much-
ends up being 75, and then this is market lots at Village by the Cove. So these are the duplexes and single family homes that are going in at Village by the Cove.
Okay.
And it's roughly the same overall density. So in terms of like viewing, okay, what is this going to look like? And that's also why I tried to provide the just that sort of density scale that's in here. I also brought this lovely book I have from Dennis that has examples of things at different densities. So it goes in and it says,
Yeah, no, I have the pictures.
For-
So
Well,
what's the?
actually, yeah, I went and used the numbers at the bottom.
Yeah,
They just
total
say,
units. Yeah.
yeah, it should equate to the units per acre at the top.
So is the current density 12.5 units per acre?
Oh, currently? No. So currently it's, you know, there's 1 unit allowed, or I guess we could say there's 2, if there's 1 in a secondary suite, in theory, in the 10 lots, and if they're each about a quarter acre.
So that's 11 over,
12 units an acre is, it's a very loose, generous townhouse density.
okay.
Though you can,
It's even not, it's funny, it's like townhouse, but even it's not, like it's almost not, like if these came on their own, they're building a
Yeah.
duplex or a triplex on the property, and they're
Yeah.
pretty, like,
So right now it's 11 units over 2.5 acres?
there's 10 units right now.
10 units over 2, oh good, that makes the math a whole bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
but the problem is these properties are so deep that they're, to get a low density in there, they're gonna have side yards and inner courts and all kinds of stuff that could be done nicely, and it can be a mess.
So my math is the current density is 4 units per acre,
Yeah.
and they're pretty close together already, aren't they? There's,
A quarter of an acre on a lot, that's a good
Pretty good
size lot.
size.
Yeah.
The street on Bowen Road, the shops in there, or they're basically 1/10 of an acre. There are 10 lots to an acre,
Okay.
all down the main street.
okay, you know where I'm being a bit confused is the lots are quite deep, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So although they seem close together, they're
Like they're-
close.
Sort of the built
Frontage.
form on them. I don't know if you can really see from the ortho, but yeah, essentially a lot of them are like cottages that are built almost rectangles.
Yeah.
So they are close to each other because essentially they're bungalows that are built stretched across the lot with a big front and a big backyard,
Okay.
but they're sort of closer together on the ends.
Well, I mean, I'm in favor of increased density personally, especially that area, walking distance, anything walking distance to the ferry. You could put in a 30-story high-rise as far as I'm concerned.
We'll make that the APC recommendation.
But I mean, the thing is this is really perfectly situated for that kind of density.
Yeah.
Because you're not blocking anybody's views with those.
Yeah.
You know, you're right against the road. The utilities actually are across the street, but there is that density. Once you shave off some of the road, And if you can put some of those blocks together,
Oh, sure.
it's,
And you know, across the road is,
yeah.
you're not going to get that sort of tunnel effect you get in a lot of neighborhoods with lots and lots of apartments, because it's going to be either forest or, you know, buildings with large space, yeah.
Yeah, and I think you need to reserve a front setback, you know, a treed front setback. There's some beautiful, huge trees there, but I'm sure they would go with development. They're right on the property line. Yeah.
It's funny, even, I was trying to just this afternoon get it on the street view to get a sense of what Miller is, and how many of these are actually like not here anymore. Like these are all cleared out. The lot that's rezoned is cleared out. The one at the end as well has had clearing done. So like, and I guess partly it's winter too, but you know, like this is my walk home every day. And like this, it looks very different than it does on street view now. It's a lot less tree than it was whenever they Google came by.
I was actually, I didn't have my map with me, and I was trying to figure out which was the lot that was going for rezoning. Aren't you supposed to have a sign there? Are they supposed to have a sign there?
No, they're not required to have a sign there.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Has somebody acquired all those properties? Or is this just a,
So one came forward with a rezoning application, 1050 Miller. Yeah, which somebody bought, which is
It's just the one lot, right? You've got a
Yeah, just one.
aerial photograph of it.
lot 4. Yeah.
this one is left blank, is that the one with the
Yeah. So one's blank.
insurance plate?
Yeah.
Right.
The ambulance place. So it's this one.
Yeah, and they've taken the house away already, right? That was there?
No.
No, so it has a dwelling within it, so it's an ambulance station with a dwelling and the insurance.
Oh, I see.
Place. So some of the comments I've got from some of the committees, well, the mayor's standing committee that I went to, is that we really should just include this one in the planning for as well as an option. So currently, it's not in this map because this is the properties that are village residential, and this one's still institutional in our OCP designation is institutional. But the comment from the mayor's standing committee is, well, the planning for the ambulance station, or the planning for the health clinic that's going in here, is they would love to someday attract the ambulance station to be part of a future expansion of the health center immediately across the street, at which point you'd want to plan that this be, you know, this could then become village residential and become not institutional and become village residential in the future. So
Who owns that lot?
it's an individual. I've met with her. I don't remember her name.
Oh, okay. So not the new.
No.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean, all that makes sense. That previous slide you had about water and sewer, and I mean, yeah, those are givens, I would think.
Yeah, so that's some of the sort of the technical work that we have to do as staff, the capacity and then like financial implications of it. To say, okay, and then, you know, if people want to have one and they want to rezone it, it would allow them to have 4 units on it. Well, the expectation is through that they pay whatever municipality, but water and sewer and,
So it mystifies me, you know, the library is not on the sewer system, it has its own septic field. It just, there's inconsistencies all over the place.
Yeah.
Of course, now it's a lovely little garden with trees coming up.
Well, their septic field is actually right here.
Oh, okay.
They
Oh, it's where the septic
Clifton
tanks
Park.
are.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So the plan is when the fire hall is built, it will then capture the library and connect to the sewer line. Yeah.
Wow.
It's an underground tunnel.
So if you ever are in Crippen Park and you find a pipe, just don't.
Just leave it alone. Yeah, there's all kinds of metal debris in Crippen
Yeah.
Park. I think some of it goes back to the Union steamship, but.
Yeah.
So, okay, so we like that, it sounds like we like the idea, but we're concerned about increasing traffic, on-site parking.
Can I take over, maybe? Daniel?
Yes.
Okay, can we start?
And setbacks? I guess so.
Yeah, setbacks from Miller Road with front plantings.
Okay, so I don't have any of that. Can you repeat what, or do you want to see what I have?
Okay.
I don't think I was just, so the city of Vancouver example I provided, like they had 5.5 meter setbacks. So that was like for Vancouver context, I think that sounds like that's a lot.
Yeah, 20 feet.
Yeah.
Uh,
I guess because they're not, yeah.
Well, that's 15, 16 feet.
Yeah, it says here plus minus 18 feet.
Oh, this,
18
oh,
feet, okay.
So I just had the traffic flow, I got widening for basically Louise's comment.
yeah, can you throw increased in there? We want to make it,
Here?
yeah,
Yeah, I throw anything in, I don't think I have great wording here.
increased traffic flow.
And then I just think I missed what you said about the public amenity, Dennis, what are you talking about?
Actually, the public amenity, well, the front yard setback, landscape setback off, adjacent to Miller.
Is that right?
Yep.
Mhm.
So this type of development would not be subject to conservation development. Is that accurate? Given the
Yeah.
amount of building on the lots.
That's why I would, yeah, in part because they're sort of, like the lots themselves.
But we-
Sorry, I can go.
Sorry, no, that's okay.
We excluded Snug Cove from the policy.
Yeah.
I thought we had done it just because David figured it would be easier to sell the policy if Snug Cove were not in it, but now I realize that it's not practical.
Is that right?
But that's what
I think it
happens.
says outside Suncoast.
Conservation
Yeah,
development policy?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Was the committee that was talking about the land, people getting together and making it
Yeah.
clustered?
Yeah, I mean, so some of the, like, so I think, yeah, conservation development kind of, yeah, because in a sense it almost is, you mentioned it, it's clustered with Crippen Park across the, you know, if it was all one big area, they said, okay, this will all be park, and this will be the houses.
Yeah.
You know, sort of. Okay, so
That's,
but, it was the,
But I get your point. I mean, if Crippen Park were amenable to this kind of intense development, then we'd have Yaletown.
yeah.
Yeah.
So the ECAP committee, the Environmental Climate Action, one of the things they were talking about was the desire almost for people to consolidate lots and how that makes for more just overall green space in the development. So if you picture like the village by the Cove, the Snug Cove House, they're going to be lots of houses with all these little gaps between each one, which is not really going to be usable. There's going to be essentially like a little path between each house, right, on each side of the property. Versus if they were all done together, then the houses would all be pushed together and you end up with a more usable green space on the edge.
yes.
So the idea to try to, you know, slant the zoning so that people want to consolidate, so there's more usable green space and yards left over.
Yeah.
So, offhand, you know what the density is of that Snug Cove?
It's
The-
33.
Yeah, so I said it was,
33.
like when I was doing the math just for the market lots.
Oh, that's
It ends
is that what it's called? Village
Yeah,
by the
Village
Cove?
by the Cove, and it's,
Didn't know that.
it's in this funny phase where I get Snug Cove House and people who have just been seeing the marketing from Snug Cove House and buy in and stuff. When I say, oh, here's Snug Cove House lots, they don't know what that is, they just know that it's Village by the Cove, it's the name, so. But essentially,
That's
when I was doing the math, it
right.
essentially looks similar to what the rezoning application was,
Okay.
which is that 18
That's a good example.
on a lot.
Yeah, no, the proposal for this would not go ahead one lot at a time. You're looking at a developer buying all the property.
I think that's, well,
Put
with
the whole thing
rezoning the
together,
entire
to
thing,
all
yeah.
be one.
Yeah. I think that would be the effect of rezoning the entire, wouldn't it?
I mean, I guess how I see it is, I mean, there's different ways council can do it, but one is like essentially you would have the zoning in place, you would have the like development permit and development guidelines in place, and then people could still come and apply to rezone and say, no, I want to join this zone, and council said, this is what we want all these properties to be, but you still have to come individually, in part because then that's how we're gonna capture you to pay the water and sewer money and get the dedication and whatever else.
If this were to go ahead as a development, as a group, is it possible for the municipality to request that the owners give up, say, 10 or 15 feet of the property on the lane side so the lane could be widened?
Yeah,
I mean, these are
that would
deep-
be part of
These
the,
are deep lots,
yeah,
and if you took 10 or 15 feet off all the lots, you could widen the lane, even possibly put parking.
yeah.
I think that's right, because basically the property line on here is this fence line.
So, but this is a bit of a, not, well, political probably is the right word. You have one owner who wants this more dense rezoning, right?
Yeah.
We have 9 other owners, all of whom may object to it. No, do they must get notice, right? They get an opportunity
So
to,
in December, I notified them all,
okay.
essentially to let them know we've had this application, we're doing this review for all of it.
Okay, but do they realize that their own land is gonna be rezoned? Okay, and have you gotten
Well,
comments, or?
So council hasn't determined that like they'll be rezoning those properties versus just having like a policy and approach in place for all of it to say, now people can come forward and apply the rezone. And
Okay.
you'll get to this.
But if we rezone all 10 lots, that doesn't stop somebody with one lot just keeping their single-family dwelling there and not, but they may end up with townhouses and things next door to them.
Yeah.
And the property value will go up considerably, won't it? Most of them are more likely to capitulate and give up their house for the amount of money that a developer would pay to have a
To own
piece
all
of
10,
land.
yeah, to the assembly. Okay, no, I can see, yeah.
Will rezoning it automatically put the value of the land up?
Well, we won't be rezoning them, we'll just have some standards that if they wanted to rezone and develop it, they'd have to have a certain amount of land and setbacks and all this kind of stuff.
But if one or two of them went for this,
Yeah.
the rest of them, will all the other adjacent properties be taxes go up on the assumption that they could rezone?
So if their assessed value went up,
Right.
then it would, like then their, yeah, then their taxes, like if then it went up, if it went up more than other places in on Bowen, right, then your
Yeah.
taxes would go up. I mean, I would say to some extent, like, my sense is the properties along there, to a certain extent, the potential for redevelopment has been factored into the price a little bit. So I know whenever a for sale sign goes up on there, I consistently get, 5 or 10 calls from people saying, what can I do there? Can I build something? And every time I point them to those same OCP policies and say, we've pictured something here, and this is what we have to consider.
Okay.
Does rezoning this area set a precedent for what could happen on other parts of the island?
The other place that's sort of similar, has different challenges, but similar in that it's village residential OCP designation, is the area essentially behind the pub. So behind the pub, up from the baseball field, there's a series of single-family homes in there that are similarly village residential designated as the OCP.
It should only affect within Stunt Cove, right?
Yeah, and so it's literally that's the other spot.
And that's another prime spot, I would think,
Yeah.
isn't it? Again, you've got Crippen Park backing up, which is nice, so the baseball field.
Yeah.
Actually, I wish my taxes were like $50,000 a year, because that would mean I had a $10 million property. which- Anyway, okay.
Okay, so getting back to your list,
And so what I've been telling all the committees too is that essentially I've been doing a first round for initial comments for things to think about. And knowing that I'll be coming back, before I go back to council, I'll be coming to all the committees again to say this is more, I've got more information to share with you and more, some sort of results and, whatever else to have a second kick at.
I think, first one bullet would be that we support the redevelopment of those properties.
With
provided
With increased density?
with increased density. Yeah.
So, you're not developing it, you're just upzoning it, right, at this point?
Well, I think one of the points we'll make in below is that we don't actually rezone at this point, but
So
in
maybe
fact
the-
develop an overlaid zone that could be applied to this area.
So it's support increased density.
Yeah, just in general, we don't have to put a number on it, right?
Yeah. And in the properties designated.
And
Are we on Miller Road give it
Well, it's down there, it's,
up? Oh, sorry.
Okay, and then you need
It's in?
closure quotes.
village.
Hold on, yes, those are
Where?
quotes. And then I need that, right?
Yeah, with the following comments.
that zoning standards be developed
For these properties?
for these properties that include such things as you want to just sort of do the zoning stuff, density and use and setback from Miller Road and widening of Seniors Lane.
I've got Miller Road and Seniors Lane on the next
Oh, down
one.
the next one.
Yeah, we have that already, yeah.
Okay.
I've got setbacks down below as
How
well.
about, what you're really getting at, that include, I don't know if this is the right word, but dedication to the municipality of land sufficient to satisfy the conditions below. Well, that really puts the cattle on the pitches, doesn't it? Yeah, you can develop it, but you have to give us,
Satisfy the conditions listed below.
yeah.
This business of dedicating other land,
Sorry,
I mean, I've got lots of land, and some of it's absolutely inaccessible, top of the mountain. Could I go to a developer and say, hey, I'll give you 10 acres of land, that'll satisfy the municipality? It's no use to municipalities, no use to me. Does it allow these things to go ahead at maximum density?
This is the transfer of
Yeah.
land thing, yeah. Well, every case has to be
Density
different,
transfer?
yeah.
Yeah, so you could sell some of your density.
Yeah, quite happily sell some of my density.
Although Daniel says it's never been done.
Well, I can
You'd
see
be the
it
first.
wouldn't be any advantage to anybody, unless they gave me a lot of money.
Well, that's why I think it's such an odd concept, because why, yeah, it encourages exactly that, selling density where you're never gonna have density anyway, right? I mean, it seems to me that the properties have to be comparable in the sense that you are giving up an allowed density, a reasonably allowed density in one property for the new one. So, yeah, the mountainside, that's a perfect example, because it's not developable. So, yeah, maybe we can amend that to talk about developable density or something as you go forward.
Yeah.
Sometime in the future, when the question comes up.
When David wants to sell his land.
Yeah.
Well, you could put a house up there, and I'm zoned for 1 house per acre plus accessory building, at least 2 houses there.
Helicopter.
$1 million to put a road in,
Helicopter.
helicopter access only.
Oh, look, so now, organized.
Yeah.
Swiffer.
What's above this now? Oh, that's it.
That's it.
Okay.
Dennis had comments about, like the tiered zoning, or step zoning or something.
Yeah, that's the one I was
Yeah,
talking about, that I
yeah.
missed.
That ranges of density be allowed based on amenities provided, such as rental units and affordable units provided as a ratio of the total number of
That's me.
units.
Yeah.
Okay.
Makes sense?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Not to new people?
yeah.
Okay.
Oh, like a ratio for that's a total ratio
Actually, it's not really the total number of units, because it's the number of units in that particular area.
Yeah.
I'd take total out, because that just makes it sound like it's the whole development,
Right.
just as a ratio. Oh, well, yeah, just, yeah, they're of, yeah. We need another of in there, but that's the idea.
As a ratio, number of units?
No, ratio of number of no, ratio of units works, yeah.
Just take out number.
Yeah. Everybody wants to be an editor, right?
It's okay, I'm not sure.
Yes, I like that idea, because you can, it gives some flexibility, doesn't it, Dennis?
Yeah. And do we want to say, let's see.
Well, how
Use a ratio, and landscaped, streetscape, provision of landscape.
So that one's the point above. The front yard setbacks be required to provide landscaping adjacent to mill.
Okay, yeah.
Can we-
Got it.
Can we talk about that just a little bit?
Uh-huh.
Because in all of the documentation that you sent, I thought there were some really good examples of like pedestrian scale on the, with regard to the front road.
Yep.
And
on the street?
and allowing sort of more personal enjoyment landscaping to be in a courtyard or on the backside or somewhere else, like for the pleasure of the people who are residing in this, in a more densified unit or organization of units. I'm wondering if sacrificing the front setback would be more valuable for the people who are going to reside.
So
Because
have
they
it-
get some-
yeah, have it closer to Miller, but
Yeah.
have a more, like, more of a yard.
Yeah, more of an organized landscaping for the people who are living there on the backside, on the less busy side.
Which one did you want to look at? Do you remember?
Well, I was just looking at all, I think Moodyville shows a really good example of front, just,
the one with, this picture is really interesting, yeah. Is that the back of the property, Daniel, do you know?
no, that's along the,
No, that's sort of the general area.
It's
got-
General area.
And it's got the cement plant. Inside of it.
So this is, okay, this is near the ironworkers bridge, I've never seen it before.
yeah, it's up high.
And so just giving you like this whole thing with massive guidelines and sort of giving you like snips of them.
I think what caught my attention was that sort of pedestrian scale, where on the front side of the building should be scaled properly and pleasant to look at. And obviously the laneway doesn't necessarily have to be pretty, but there were other configurations that allowed for some green space behind.
We didn't specify a particular setback though, right? We just,
No, but
I wonder if we could generalize that.
the setback is for amenity in reality, in a pedestrian district, the setback should not be too great. It should be, buildings should be pulled up. That's not to say you shouldn't have create courtyards and indentations of it, but the people walking and the people out on their balconies can wave at each other and and talk and that sort of thing. It's sort of an important thing in walkable communities, and I think it's appropriate here. But we could say, we could amenities, including courtyards or,
Yeah.
you know, a limited setback from,
That's the front yard there or down?
yeah, we're down the front yard setbacks
Be limited?
and be required,
Required to be limited?
and possibly, no. Well, I think that's too much detail in this one, nobody will understand it, but maybe front yard setbacks be required to provide landscaping adjacent to the mill setback, and this is under a list of.
Well, if it's front yard, it has to be Miller Road, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of like Louisa's comment about provide landscaping and pedestrian-friendly environment.
Yeah, good.
On the other hand, those properties faced east, the front yard would.
Yeah.
And if you were living there and you come home in the evening and want to spend some time in your yard, you'd be in the shade.
Yeah, you're gonna go to the other side.
People would
yeah.
probably prefer more grass on the south and west side of their property. And the front yard probably wouldn't be used hardly at all.
Well, except that that's where all their neighbors come.
Well, neighbors would be
Well,
facing the back too.
yeah, now you've got that sort of cliff with trees and everything on the back, so there's not really, except at high noon, do you really ever get a lot of sun in that corridor, do you, on seniors? Because,
Yeah, by 5 o'clock, even in the summer, I think you'd be getting into shade there.
yeah,
And the other thing is, you're gonna be sitting there looking out onto traffic, heavy traffic,
Yeah.
as the ferries go by. And the sidewalk is on the other side, Fairview Park side, unless you're thinking of a sidewalk on both sides.
I think a sidewalk on both sides is probably not a bad idea. Because the other side is going to be redeveloped with more residential and commercial and that sort of thing, probably.
But would Seniors Lane not be the sidewalk access to town for most of those people?
I think maybe the people in the top units might use that. There's a lot of people, who go to Bowen Court, just walk up and down Seniors Lane.
That is one of the challenges I've had thinking about it in terms of, normally you'd want to front the townhouses onto Miller. And you say that's the front, like car access comes through the lane, that's where the garages are, and the front doors open onto Miller, and that's where people come out. But right now, it's like you come out and there's a ditch, and then there's, you cross the road and get to the sidewalk. So you go, okay, is the plan actually we want to have, that second sidewalk down Miller, so we're covering over the ditch, it's and there'll be two, at least for that stretch, and then when you get to the end, when you get to Millard at Village by the Cove, you'd cross, there'd be another crosswalk and people could cross over,
Yeah.
but the goal is, and that's what the rezoning ask as well, is saying, you're gonna develop to front Miller, and you're gonna build the path down the front, actually, that one.
This one?
Yeah,
Nobody's gonna be able to stop and park in front of the building and let their friends
No.
out, are they?
no,
No,
So, access to the front door, so to speak, is only for a person walking out and walking to town,
yeah.
not to be picked up by a car or to have a.
well, there's probably should be the ability to just have some pull-outs along there. If you could do that.
Yeah.
That's another lane
Well,
though. Or 10 or 12 foot
Yeah.
piece out of somebody's property.
But
Well-
I think at this point, we're just sort of trying to establish the
Yeah.
principles and how they get it done.
Yeah.
I mean, this kind of development, when you look at it in, big cities like London, or nobody expects to park in front. I mean, you just can't. not the way you can use land. I wonder if we can just modify the word setbacks and just sort of just put something like minimum, so that then it's understood that, yeah, before you type stuff though, because I may not have agreement yet.
This will all work out when the architects get at it.
Yeah. Just to, no, actually, I'm happy with it the way it is now, just because it just says that we would address the issue of what the place looks like from the road by setbacks.
I think,
But I'd like to see them pretty small.
I think page 33, I thought this was a really good graphic, because it shows how multiple units can be reconfigured or depending upon density. And I think if this whole stretch, if we think of this whole stretch and only think of it as townhouses side by side, boom, 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 then we're gonna be thinking about it in a particular manner. But if we think about a reconfiguration of all those lots together, then it becomes something different and it looks different. So it's kind of hard to, I think, assign particular language when there's so much potential for different configurations of units.
So maybe in our list of bullets, do we want to make a statement about we encourage that properties be assembled, 2 or more properties be assembled for redevelopment? Or we want to encourage properties to be.
We recognize the potential benefit of assemblage.
To realize that.
How about something like that, zoning standards be developed to encourage assemblage of properties?
Are we getting rid of the potential benefit?
Okay, I can leave the rest there.
Well, you could take potential out. Would that encourage? Encourage. Well, let's see. To encourage the assemblage of properties.
Does that work?
That works for me.
Does that make sense, Daniel? That zoning standards, can we make zoning standards that encourage the?
I would
Is
say
it?
the assembly or property assembly.
That's a better way of putting it, property assembly.
Assemblage.
So to encourage property assembly.
To encourage property assembly for redevelopment. And that's a real good way of making the neighbors happy, because you are your own neighbor.
So do you want to put these two on top, so that little weird bullet is the bottom?
Sure, so you're doing like big picture.
Yeah.
We think, you have amenity zoning, have encourage assembly, and then these are the details that we're.
Okay. Yeah, I was taught never to use the passive, so I should say that
We don't know
that Daniel
what the
developed zoning standards.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes you
Yeah,
have to
right.
use the passive in this industry. Or the word staff.
Boy, if we could get all that done,
Yeah, no problem.
that's I'm basically on this committee to make sure I have a place to live when I'm 85 or 75. Anyway, that could be really interesting, because I mean, from an aesthetic point of view, I'm sure there are lovely people who live along that road, but it does look a little sort of Swamp Hollow-ish right now, doesn't
Some
it?
of the properties
Yeah.
are really third world.
Okay, let's
Sorry, that's where Steph lives.
Oh,
Mover. You guys happy with that?
Yes.
sounds good.
You're gonna get someone to move it.
Oh, yes, we need a motion.
Oh, okay.
Well, somebody wants to move the motion as written. We can just say that.
Yeah.
Motion is written.
Done.
Okay, and I'll second that.
Okay? Yep.
All in favor?
All unanimous.
This is why I want 5 o'clock meetings, because then we get tired maybe.
Because if somebody moves a motion and seconds it, you've got a majority already, because the chairman doesn't vote unless there's a tie.
Oh, okay.
No, I
My
like the
chairs
chair
always
always
vote.
vote.
No.
Huh?
They always vote.
I know, because you can't stop them.
No, like they always vote.
Gary always votes.
We like to, he
It's
does.
our old mayor tried not to vote all the time, and then he did.
Yeah, it was looked into.
And he makes motions and he does, he just, yeah.
So our next meeting tentatively scheduled for 5 on the
February 17th.
17th, okay. But we will canvass, and I say we as, my,
Yeah.
we'll
Then
get
we-
to the 5
the
p.m.
passive
marks.
tense.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll move an adjournment then.
Adjourned.
Nice work.